quite a bit of news, actually, quite a bit of news. So the first bit of news here, for all of you Last Guardian fans out there, shout in excitement, The Last Guardian has finally gone gold. Shuhei Yoshida tweeted about 5 days ago, I've waited a very long time to say this, The Last Guardian has gone gold. I'm so excited for you all to finally experience it. He actually wasn't the first person to tweet this. Somebody else actually tweeted. I forgot who it was, and it doesn't say it in the article, so forgive me for that. Somebody else tweeted it. They took it down, and then Shuhei tweeted it out. So I don't think it's... Some people are speculating that Shuhei wanted to make the announcement himself. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that he was the one set to make the announcement. Somebody's like, I want to be the guy to make the news, I want to be the guy to say it. So I don't know.
Shuhei gets on the phone. He's like, delete your Twitter. Just delete it.
Delete it, yeah. So that's cool. It's finally gone gold, which means that it's certified and it's ready to be shipped out. So we're going to see. I'm still kind of cautiously optimistic. I hope people who have been waiting for this game forever enjoy it, but I don't know if it's going to be a very good game. But we'll see. So there's that. The second bit of news...
Use some early reviews on that one, that's for sure.
That's called foreshadowing. So the second bit of news here comes by way of Deadline.com. Speaking of cautiously optimistic, Sean Levy, however you want to pronounce it. Everyone has, tons of people have that last name of Levy, and a bunch of people pronounce it differently. Anyways, he's set to direct Uncharted now, PlayStation's video game movie on fast track. For those of you guys who don't know, Uncharted has been in the works as a movie for a long time. There have been several directors attached to it. Sean Levy is just the newest. He was behind Stranger Things, and as well as, what was the other thing he worked on here? I'm trying to look for it. It's not mentioned in this article, but he's working on a lot of Night at the Museum. He also worked on Night at the Museum, and which people liked. It wasn't a great movie. People liked it. And Stranger Things, obviously, the phenom it was for Netflix. So, yeah, what do you guys think about... You guys are the PlayStation guys for the most part. Do you think this movie will ever be made, or do you think this is just another news of a director that's going to leave? What do you think of the Uncharted movie?
I remember when I did the Uncharted 4 review, one of the things I said was, this game is probably a better movie than the Uncharted movie has a chance at being.
Yeah.
That's still how I feel, and if this ever happens, which what you ask, I don't even know. Maybe.
Well, and the weird thing too is, so there's the whole argument of why are video games even trying to be movies? But I think Uncharted, out of a lot of franchises, can make the argument of our games are so cinematic and the gameplay isn't really the primary function of our games. Why make a movie? There's other games that the lore, or the narrative or stuff isn't the strongest, and you can kind of try to make it a better property. But with Uncharted, it seems like the games are cinematic experiences. They are movies that you just so happen to shoot things in, right? So it's weird. I don't know if this will ever be made. It's like the news this year of Aaron Greenberg and Microsoft saying that the Gears of War movie's in production too. Remember when the Halo movie was in production? It takes a lot for these movies to get off the ground, just because if they're trying to handle it right, there's a lot of people that are going to argue about what exactly the path they want to take with the movie. So we'll see if this ever comes to light.
When it comes to these video game movies, I'm seriously thinking I'll believe them when I see them, and I mean sitting in the theater watching the previews. Assassin's Creed, I'm still skeptical if this movie's even coming out.
If it even exists still, I'm the same way. I'm like, is that still a real thing? Yeah, I feel you so much on that. The next couple of stories we have here are Nintendo Switch related. So the first bit of news here comes by way of Alex Osborne over at IGN, and he writes, a Nintendo Switch not backwards compatible with physical 3DS or Wii U games. This isn't surprising. We saw the announcement. It has a cartridge port. I don't know if people were expecting it to maybe... I was thinking there could be a possibility that the cartridge port for the Switch games could also kind of have a two type of slot kind of thing where the 3DS cards would fit too. I never would have assumed that this would play Wii U games. The 3DS one is the more interesting one. But he goes on to write, Nintendo Switch won't be able to play your library of Wii U discs or 3DS cartridges, as Nintendo has confirmed that its upcoming console doesn't feature physical backwards compatibility. I think that's the most interesting thing, is they say physical, which is weird to me that they would point that out, because Nintendo doesn't really have an account management system. If you lose your 3DS and you have digital games on there, you lose access to those games. So I don't know if they're actually implementing an account system that's retroactive. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works, because it's weird to me that they would specifically call out physical, It's super weird to me. So
the eShop, that's a big... We'll see if that's on there.
Exactly. I want to see
Big
if they actually
question.
have account management and you owning games retroactively and see how that works, because that's one thing that, amongst a lot of other things, has kind of had people kind of stay back from purchasing a Nintendo console, because you have to continuously buy their games over and over and over again. So
Not, I don't think we'll see.
Ridiculous.
I think it's more than just physical. I don't think there's any way that there can be any Wii U games that'll play on this that are, unless they're ported and made for it, right? And the reason being, like, this thing can't have a touchscreen. I didn't think about it until recently, but if this has a touchscreen, how do you use it when it's docked?
They actually already talked about the Joy-Con controllers have sensors on them. They have sensors on them when you take it off. The reason the console in the dock faces forward is so they can interact with those sensors, and you will be able to have touch functionality on it. They've
So
already come out and said
basically,
that.
you'd have a Wii remote replacing touching a screen.
Exactly. Yeah.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
I mean,
will
for
not
people
be using that.
for people who like want to play, if those old games are compatible, if they want to play them, it's kind of like the sacrifice they have to make, or just play them on your Wii U. I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever.
Those things are gonna be so cheap, like $50 in a year.
Also, you think about it, a lot of the games we saw were newer versions of Wii U games. I'm not going to want to... I wouldn't even worry about the old version of the Wii U version of a game when the newer version has more features. It probably runs better on the system. It's not a port.
Seems like they're porting a lot
pseudo-port
of stuff.
Yeah. Some of them are better than ports, though, because it seems like they are adding features, so it's not a straight one-to-one port,
Yeah, you're right. You're right, yeah.
So it is interesting. The second story about Nintendo Switch comes away of GameSpot. Timur Hussein writes, the Nintendo Switch will ship 2 million units in launch month, says President. Kimishima also confirms Nintendo Switch won't be sold at a loss. Nintendo's next gaming platform, Switch, will ship 2 million units during the financial year ending March 2017. According to company president Tatsumi Kimishima, shipping units doesn't translate to sales, so the number is more indicative of how many consoles Nintendo is aiming to have with retailers during its first month of sale. Speaking during a financial briefing, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, Kimishima also said Switch won't be sold at a loss. This is noteworthy as traditional hardware is sold at a loss and software is used to recoup these costs. Not necessarily, considering PS4 was recently sold at a profit. Sony came out and stated, and we kind of saw that, so I don't think Nintendo's the first one trying to do this. It also, in the story, I don't want to read the whole thing because it's kind of a long story, so definitely go check it out. It'll be in the description if you want to read the whole thing. The other thing they go into is that they're listening to feedback from users of what they kind of feel the price. They're trying to feel out the price. And this is kind of an interesting thing, too, with Nintendo. If they announce the console just to hear feedback, so that way they know where they can play around with. Like, if $300 is too expensive, if $250 is the sweet spot, that might not totally be the case, but it is interesting. Also to note, Wii U shipped with 3.6 million units at launch when it came out, and they were a little over bold with that, considering it didn't sell too well. It launched at launch. It had one fourth or even 1/3 of what their total sales were lifetime. So you see how over anxious they were with that console.
Jeez.
This seems like they're a little bit safe, and this is, I think, harkening back to Nintendo's what do you call it? Where you kind of fake the need for something. What is it called?
Oh, the Blue Ocean.
No. Where it's
Artificial demand.
Artificial demand. There you go. That's the term I was looking for. Where they don't make as many units just because they want it to seem like it's always in demand, meaning people always want to get their hands on one. It's so hard to find. It's kind of like the Wii thing.
So yeah, when Wii came out and they were going for like $2,000 on eBay.
Yeah.
And obviously Nintendo wouldn't get any of that $2,000, but that people hear that story, and then the next time they do see one in the store for the regular price, they pick it up, and that led to a lot of
I need to
sales.
buy it, and it keeps people talking about the console too.
Yep.
The thing with this though is going to be interesting is that this is the first console handheld hybrid, and it seems like, looking at numbers of the way handhelds sell, there is a higher demand. So this might even be an even crazier artificial demand, because it is a pseudo handheld, meaning that the market for it will skew younger. Consoles aren't always bought by parents for their kids, but handhelds more than often are. So we'll see how this all works out. Interesting. Nintendo always decides to do weird things, so that's not out of their wheelhouse by any means.
Better pre-order it.
You pre-ordered it?
You better
Oh
if you
no,
want
yeah,
it.
yeah, you better pre-order it.
I
And
tried to. Amazon doesn't have it yet.
also, yeah, people remember there's email lists for Best Buy and Amazon and other places. So if you want to be the first to pre-order it, definitely go there. Also, the thing with Amazon, it doesn't charge you until it actually ships. So just you can go in there, pre-order it, and then if you can actually afford it, then you can actually take it off and it doesn't charge you right away. So just a tip there. So the next story here isn't a news story, but it's something that people were talking about in the industry, and I went and actually looked at the Twitter thread, so I screen capped it. So this Twitter account called PC Games N, which is I think a news outlet of some sort, basically has a story, and they put Bethesda's DC Deacon, which Pete Hines' Twitter account, says Evil Within and Rage did well enough to get sequels. Also in the article, they talked about them currently working on Elder Scrolls 6. Hines replied to this and said, "Thanks, FYI, the Elder Scrolls 6 isn't in development. We simply said we wouldn't make it eventually. We would make it eventually. Don't want people to be misled." Then a random Twitter user replied, "This is PR for yes, we're working on it, but pre-alpha status, LOL." Hines replied to that and said, "No, it just means nobody is working on it." And that same user replied and said, "Sorry, but I'll have to disagree. Given how Bethesda operates in the past, I'm sure it's in pre-alpha state at the moment." And then Hines replied to that, considering he works at Bethesda, he's the vice president of PR and marketing. He said, "No, it isn't in development." So I want to talk about this. So, Elder Scrolls 6, according to Hines, isn't in development. What do you guys take from this, and what do you guys feel about it not being in development? Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, we have to believe Pete Hines. I don't know why this Twitter user thinks
We must
he's
believe
so
him.
much smarter.
Exactly, man.
So, I mean, maybe there's some ideas floating around, and we talked about it before the show. There's some drawings on some whiteboards over there or something. I don't know. But I believe him for the most part. Like, this isn't being worked on. It seems like they have a lot of other stuff going on right now.
Yeah, also, if you look at it, Oblivion came out. It was a shock to the market. People were like, "Oh, this RPG, we haven't seen something like this, right?" Skyrim came out. Same exact thing. Fallout 3, before that came out. Same exact thing. Fallout 4 was their first kind of, and though their games haven't always run perfectly, Fallout 4 is definitely their first sign of them developing in a vacuum, right? Heavy-handed.
But compare the sales of Fallout 4 in the first year or whatever to those other games.
Yeah, I'm not saying Fallout 4 did bad, but it was obviously developed in a vacuum. And I think, Todd Howard and those guys have kind of they have an eye for quality, and I think they're willing to see when they come short with the likes of like Witcher and stuff. And I think that them not going right into Elder Scrolls 6 like a lot of people anticipated, I think it's them reworking the engine and working on making a better experience, because even though they were innovators for the longest time, I think they're starting to see that they're kind of falling behind. Though their games are critically well received, they are starting to look like they are being developed in a vacuum, So
I think Bethesda Game Studios, the specific studio and not the publisher.
yeah,
I think that they take way too long making their games. It's like 5 years. And I don't know, maybe most other studios delay into 5 years and they just don't delay their games. But it seems like there's other studios getting games out faster, and especially in the AAA space. So I feel like they're taking too long.
yeah, but on the scope and scale that they make their games, there's nobody else in the industry that does them sooner. Like, look how long Rockstar takes. Even CD Projekt Red, like Cyberpunk 2077, that announcement trailer was shown 4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So I do think
you're
it's the
right.
scope of those games is the reason.
Yeah,
it
you're
takes
right.
so long.
You're right, Jordan. That's a long time.
I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that relatively speaking to other games of their same scope and scale, it is long. And I'm fine with a game taking 5 years if it's a game that ends up feeling like it took 5 years to make. Unlike Last Guardian, which, whether it's good or bad, it's probably going to be a very short game that took 10 years to come to fruition. You know? So I see your argument there. Last couple of bits here before we get into our topics. The last bit of news here. Microsoft announces new VR headsets for Windows 10 starting at $299. This is over at The Verge, and it's written by Addy Robertson. Microsoft's partners will ship a new line of virtual reality headsets to take advantage of Windows 10 VR and holographic capabilities. At today's event, Microsoft said that the headsets will start at $299 and include inside-out tracking sensors, obviating the need for external cameras or laser systems like those on the current Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, HP, Dell, Lenovo, and lists all of them. While relatively little is known about the headsets, the 6th degree of freedom tracking system sounds familiar to Oculus's Santa Cruz prototype, which also includes inside-out tracking. They are distinct from Microsoft's HoloLens, an augmented or mixed reality headset that projects virtual objects into the real world. While the headsets don't need external trackers, the one we saw on stage today still looks to be wired, not totally self-contained like Santa Cruz. Last part here, Microsoft's listed partners are already working in VR to some extent. Acer is working with Starbreeze to produce the high-end Star VR headsets, and Asus showed off a leather-strapped headset behind glass at Computex, Lenovo, and Chinese startup Ant VR partnered for a mobile VR setup. While HP and Dell don't have headsets, both have produced backpack-mounted PCs. None of these companies, however, are major players in the consumer headset space, which is dominated by HTC, Sony, Samsung, and Facebook-owned Oculus. In fact, given that Microsoft has worked closely with Oculus in the past, it's interesting to see the company absent here, at the announcement of what is essentially a new line of Windows VR products. I think this is heavily hinting at some kind of VR being with Project Scorpio. I think it's going to be, my personal opinion is I think there's going to be a tier of Scorpio where you can opt into VR. Kind of like the package with PlayStation, where you get the PlayStation 4 Pro or PlayStation 4, and you get the PSVR with it. I think this is heavily reading into that for me. I think that they're kind of seeing how PSVR works, and they're going to see whether or not this is worth including as a package. But, I mean, at $299, it's still in that price range. Dom, you said you did have concerns of whether or not this can actually work with video games. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
So.
In my head, I can't quite understand the logistics of how it would work, but I'm sure I'm not obviously working for Microsoft and their design team, but that would be really cool if this worked with Scorpio, similar to how PSVR works.
Exactly. I think it's really cool. I'm interested to see how powerful it is, the extent of like the cords and stuff like that. I think that's the outside of like the graphics being up to snuff for VR, which isn't a huge concern for me considering it's such like new technology. The other gripe is like all of the cords you have to handle. So if they kind of limit that and limit the kind of external stuff you have to have, I think that's a definite win. Jordan, what do you think? Is this an indication that VR is going to be a part of Project Scorpio's overall vision, or do you think this is just Microsoft being Microsoft working on tech?
Oh, I feel like Scorpio has to be VR compatible because they're making it so beefy, and when it's coming out, I think it would just be dumb for it not to be. And hopefully it'll work with some HoloLens stuff as well, which I think HoloLens and augmented reality at this point kind of interests me more than the virtual reality stuff, but I'm totally not surprised that Windows and Microsoft would be kind of going forward with the whole VR thing and the VR headsets. So this makes sense. Not surprising, I guess.
Yeah. Dom, any closing thoughts on this with VR? You're the one that's most intrigued by VR. So what do you think about this and Microsoft kind of taking this leap as well?
Yeah, I'm curious to see if this plays into Xbox at all or if it's just a Windows thing. We'll see. But like I mentioned earlier, they do have the advantage where normally you wouldn't want to be late to a party when releasing something because you're missing out on however many years of sales. But in this case, it's to their advantage because there's not much expected in sales-wise for any VR units in the first year or two.
Exactly.
Anyway, and they get to learn from the mistakes of the other companies.
Also, think about this. The Play Anywhere initiative will be interesting, too, because if they have VR titles,
That's a good point.
You can play it on the Project Scorpio or you can play it on your own PC.
Hadn't even thought of that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept, considering it's Windows 10 compatible, and you figure one of the main operating systems for Project Scorpio will be Windows 10 in some capacity, meaning that you move from using your headset on your console to your PC. So it's going to be very interesting how that all works out. Microsoft is doing interesting things, and I'm excited to see where this goes because this might get me into VR because I am more of an Xbox guy than a PlayStation guy.